Welcome back to our channel. It is a beautiful day, and I'm just thrilled to sit down and chat with all of you. We have so much to catch up on today, and the emotions are running higher than ever. So let us get right to it. I have been watching these families navigate their complicated lives for more years than I can even count. And let me tell you, some moments just grab you right by the heartstrings and refuse to let go. When I saw that young boy finally get his father back after so much agonizing uncertainty, I had to reach straight for the tissue box. It is a truly beautiful thing to witness a family reuniting, but as any mother or grandmother will tell you, the road to healing is rarely a smooth one. We all know that profound feeling of holding someone tight after a long absence, but we also know the heavy, complicated silence that follows when the reality of the situation finally sets in. The moment that young man ran desperately into his father's arms, you could see the sheer, undeniable relief washing over his entire body. It was as clear as a bell that this child had been carrying the weight of the world on his young shoulders for months. But then, as they slowly pulled back from that desperate, clinging embrace, the boy looked up and saw the harsh truth written all over his father's face. The physical scars, the bruising, and the exhaustion were simply impossible to hide. Seeing those wounds up close, it was like a dam broke inside the boy's heart. The initial joy of the reunion suddenly gave way to a massive flood of difficult, painful questions that had been brewing in his mind for what felt like an eternity. Bless his heart, the boy did not waste any time beating around the bush. He looked his father right in the eye, his voice thick with emotion, and demanded to know why he had allowed those government agents to simply take him away. The boy knew full well that his father had stepped into the line of fire to shield another young member of their extended family, but that knowledge did not make the bitter pill any easier to swallow. For a child who has spent countless sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if his dad was lying in a ditch somewhere, the idea that his father willingly surrendered to such a dangerous fate was just too much for his young mind to comprehend. I listened closely as the father tried his absolute best to explain himself, and you could hear the raw desperation in his voice. He explained that he was forced to make a split-second decision in the heat of a terrifying moment. He knew deep down in his gut that the authorities were never going to believe his side of the story, nor would they take the word of another young boy over a seasoned, corrupt agent. It was a classic, heartbreaking case of being caught between a rock and a hard place. He did what he felt he absolutely had to do to keep an innocent child safe, sacrificing his own freedom and safety in the blink of an eye. He even went so far as to passionately assure his son that he would have made the exact same sacrifice for him without a single moment of hesitation. Now, as a longtime viewer and a mother myself, I know in my bones that he meant every single word of that statement. He is a protector by his very nature, a man who will always throw himself into the line of fire for the people he loves. But while that sounds incredibly noble and heroic on paper, it does not exactly bring a sense of comfort to a child who is left behind to pick up the broken pieces. The boy was still the one who had to suffer through the agonizing, lonely consequences of a choice he was never old enough to be burdened with. Then came the moment that absolutely shattered my heart into a million little pieces. The boy looked at his father, his voice trembling with all the hurt he had kept bottled up for so long, and asked if it had ever even crossed his mind that they might never see each other again. That question right there stripped away all the heroic armor. It cut right through all the noble justifications and laid bare the raw, bleeding wound of a child who feels entirely forgotten. It is one thing for a man to be brave, but it is another thing entirely to be so brave that you forget about the innocent people waiting for you at home. You could see the devastating realization dawn on the father's face in that very moment. The boy was not just throwing a childish tantrum or acting out of youthful rebellion. He was profoundly, deeply heartbroken. He was devastated by the terrifying fact that his father could make such a monumental, life-altering sacrifice without seemingly giving a single thought to the permanent, gaping hole it would leave in his own son's life. It is a terrible, heavy burden for a young person to carry, realizing that the man they idolize might value his own ingrained sense of duty more than he values being present for Sunday dinners, birthdays, and high school graduations. Seeing the immense pain he had caused, the father immediately offered a sincere, heartfelt apology. He looked his son squarely in the eyes and promised, with everything he had, that things were going to be completely different from here on out. He swore up and down that being a father was going to be his one and only priority moving forward. Now, those are truly beautiful words, and they are exactly what any child in that traumatic situation desperately needs to hear. But as we all know from our own long walks of life, talk is cheap and actions speak much louder than words. A promise is just a breath of air until it is backed up by real, undeniable change. The heartbreaking problem is that this father's promises have to compete with a long, exhausting history of danger, dark secrets, and high-stakes choices. This is a man who has spent years living on the absolute edge, always prioritizing the greater good or the urgent needs of his associates over the simple, quiet life of a dedicated family man. For the boy, hearing those comforting words now is like putting a tiny bandage on a very deep, very old wound. He needs tangible, concrete proof. He needs to see with his own two eyes that his father is actually willing to put the brakes on his dangerous lifestyle and just be a normal, reliable dad for once in his life. I was so incredibly impressed by how mature and grounded the young man was during this whole emotional exchange. He made sure to gently tell his father that he was not saying these things just to make him feel guilty or to punish him. He was simply trying to explain how incredibly difficult it is to live in the dark, never knowing what terrifying news the next day might bring. It takes a whole lot of courage for a child to stand their ground like that and articulate their deepest fears without resorting to screaming or anger. He was just being completely honest about the toll that all this endless uncertainty has taken on his spirit. And frankly, I think it was a conversation that was long, long overdue. The boy also pointed out a very harsh reality, one that we viewers have known and worried about for years. He noted that it is always his father who has to be the one to fall on the sword. It is always his father who takes the bullet, takes the blame, or takes the massive fall. That is the real painful crux of the issue. The boy has grown up watching his dad choose the perilous route so many times that, as the old saying goes, that dangerous path probably knows his exact shoe size by now. It is a deeply ingrained habit, a way of life that is going to be incredibly difficult to break, no matter how pure and good his intentions are right now. This is exactly why the father's next move was so incredibly crucial. Recognizing that they desperately needed to get away from the toxic, high-pressure environment of their hometown, he went to a respected, formidable elder in the family to ask for her blessing and permission to take the boy away for a few days. Getting out of town is probably the smartest, most level-headed thing he could do right now. They desperately need a total change of scenery, a quiet, isolated place where they can sit down and really hash out everything that has happened without the constant threat of the phone ringing or some new terrifying crisis knocking down their front door. They need this uninterrupted sacred time to bond and to heal their fractured relationship. The father might truly believe every single promise he is making right now, but the boy needs solid, undeniable evidence that this time is going to be different. He needs to know in his heart that his dad did not just come home for a quick visit, but that he is actually here to stay for the long haul. A few days away from the endless chaos might just give them the solid foundation they need to start rebuilding their trust. It is a small step, but it is an absolutely necessary one if they are ever going to find any real lasting peace together as a family. However, as we all know too well, nothing in this town ever stays quiet for long, and this delicate situation is certainly no exception. The boy's heartfelt, desperate demands are pushing his father into a tight corner, forcing him to make immediate, drastic changes to his entire way of life. The real story here is that these very demands for change are planting the dangerous seeds for a brand new kind of trouble. When a man who is so deeply entrenched in a dangerous, shadowy world suddenly tries to pull away and rewrite the rules of his own life, it always leaves a massive vacuum. And Lord knows, there are always dangerous, opportunistic people waiting in the shadows to take full advantage of that kind of sudden vulnerability. This new trouble that is rapidly brewing on the horizon is forcing the father to get talked quickly and decisively. He cannot just slowly and peacefully transition into being a regular family man. He has to make rapid, aggressive moves to clear his plate, tie up loose ends, and secure their safety. But acting quickly in his dangerous line of work usually means cutting corners or stepping on the wrong toes. The sheer urgency of his desperate need to change is proving to be the exact catalyst for a massive new explosion of drama and danger. It is a cruel, heartbreaking irony, really. The very steps he is taking to become a safe, reliable father are the exact same steps that are dragging a fresh, terrifying wave of chaos right to their front door.